The Motueka River is an iconic New Zealand waterway, and for the past 10 years it's been the focus of an intensive study by scientists. The goal of the Integrated Catchment Management, or ICM program, has been to gain better information to more effectively manage the land, water and coastal environments in catchments where there are many and potentially conflicting land uses, and to do so in a way that we understand both the complex way a catchment works and the way people work within it.
If you think about each one of those words, integrated catchment management, each one alone is a big concept. Try and roll them all together. It is a stretch, but it's a stretch I think that we need to make, and we need to build our knowledge about how we can do that, and that's what the research program is about. One of the ways that helps me into thinking about this is that I sometimes think about being a bird and starting at the mountaintops, being up off the landscape and looking down and flying down from the mountains all the way out to the sea, and looking at the patterns, the natural and the human patterns. At that scale, you begin to think, well, how is that related to that? How does that affect that? How does that flow into that? And that's the challenge of integrated catchment management, to make those kind of connections and then to involve people in those changes, perhaps, toward better stewardship.
Conflicts and perceptions of such things as water allocation or worsening water quality mean we need to find new ways to manage our land and water and coasts in an integrated way, and to do this collaboratively. Artist and landscape researcher Maggie Atkinson worked with others on new ways to engage people and consider stewardship of the environment at this large scale. Two projects, Travelling River and Watershed Talk, use the power of story and personal photography to get people sharing their understanding and actions around stewardship of the Motueka catchment. Travelling River built an arts and science perspective, combining over 250 community and science images and stories, and connected a different group of people who didn't have anything to do with the science of the program. Meanwhile, Watershed Talk involved about 20 people talking around issues of care and responsibility for their catchment and how more effective action could be mobilised.
Part of that is pulling together very diverse perspectives from within the catchment, very diverse voices, if you like, in building that picture, big picture, and mixing up the layers and players, if you like.
Travelling River was a pilot program bringing together scientists and artists to look into new ways of understanding and conveying ideas about the environment and social interconnections that shape the Motueka catchment. More than 60 researchers and residents contributed over 250 images and stories about some aspect of the catchment that had importance to them. The exhibition opened at Nelson Suter Gallery and later travelled to the small communities of Motueka and Tapawera.
I think one of the features of Travelling River, one of the distinctive features, was that it involved the scientists from the program. They contributed scientific images as well as photos and stories, and they were combined on the screens. And as you can see in an image of the exhibition on screens, you can see the way the cultural narrative is running horizontally, and the scientific images are those vertical drops throughout the screens. And when you brought it all together, I think for the viewing audience and for the people, the participants themselves, there was some interconnections and some convergences really that normally wouldn't happen occurring on those screens and around, and I think that was a very powerful part of how this catchment story was being told. And I think also for the scientists involved, they were seeing their part of science connected to a bigger picture as well. So it was demonstrating integration for the scientists involved, as well as for the community, seeing the science integrated into their community story as well. And I mean, this is highly relevant, seeing our individual footprint within a bigger picture. And that was the part of what was innovative about Travelling River and also Watershed Talk. How does our individual footprint and whatever we do, work, fit into the bigger picture? I think what's really important about the way the exhibition was, the concept for it and the way that it happened, was that the people who were involved were participants in creating their own story about the catchment. They weren't spectators of someone else's picture of this catchment. And I think that's not such an abstract place anymore. It's a very personal voice. And that then meant that the exhibition had a real groundedness, a real aliveness about it when the viewing audience engaged with that. And you know, when we were watching people go around the exhibition and engage with it, they were visibly moved. A lot of people were really visibly moved. One woman, she was overwhelmed to see her place reflected back to her like this. And it was a very moving experience for her. And I know she was far from alone in that.
The range of images and stories showed how different things are important to different people. Social, scientific, management and historical themes were all covered.
When it all came together, it's that thing of the sum of the parts is greater when we see it all together. So an entity, something whole, is created that's bigger than all the individual stories that are brought to it. And I think that for people looking at it creates something whole that they then can regard much more as something you might want to take care of and have a sense of stewardship toward. And seeing how moved people were, and because they were personal stories, I really think that, if you like, there was a lot of reverence for people looking at these things. They were quiet when they looked at them, and I think if we can build forums like that, or ways to express ourselves that lead to more reverence toward the environment and also a bit of humility toward it, it's not a bad place to be as we're thinking about how we look at our environment and the resources within it.
And its unique approach soon got the attention of researchers around the world.
So we were invited to go and speak about this both at the University of Washington in Seattle and also later, subsequently, at Dartington Art School in Britain. And these were big international academic fora who were very interested in how we'd done things and how we'd gone about it. So this is a travelling river that travelled a very long way.
Photography was again a central part of the innovative Watershed Talk project.
Watershed Talk was looking into how we can more effectively cultivate ideas and action around environmental stewardship at catchment scale.
Landowners, artists, tangata whenua, hunters, scientists and council staff were all involved. So too a mix of recent and long-term residents. Over 8 months, about 20 people took part in interviews, take-home tasks, group meetings and follow-up interviews. Environmental issues are complex and they require us to switch between our individual footprint and our place in the bigger picture or catchment scale. Issues require drawing on the many forms of knowledge and experience to cultivate innovative ideas and actions, because everyone can make a difference, and Watershed Talk was about ways to make that happen. After all, the way you have these conversations can make all the difference and ensure action on the ground. Watershed Talk was innovative in the approach taken, the techniques used and how platforms for discussion were built. And there were key principles: finding ways to respect diversity, creating level playing fields for discussions, value and empowering different knowledge bases and building trust between people.
Those principles are really key to developing in-depth conversations about something. The way you cultivate that, the way that ground is opened up, if you like, leads to the outcomes at the end, which I think are often more innovative, integrated solutions to problems, because you've drawn on many varying perspectives to get there, and their knowledges, their understanding.
Watershed Talk did several things to achieve effective engagement. Firstly, personal photography by the participants was used to explore issues. Freshwater ecologist Roger Young works for the Cawthron Institute and was part of the ICM research team and recalls one participant's photos having a profound impact.
It's a real inspiration, I guess, for the rest of us. And he was annoyed about some old man's beard growing in a kowhai tree outside his house, and then that just mushroomed into basically the several hundred metres of riverbank that he's got rid of all the weeds from, and it's now a beautiful spot. I think people go and picnic and that sort of thing.
This obscure map was used as an icebreaker because it required local knowledge to interpret. It got people talking about their connection with the catchment. And the way group meetings were facilitated was different to usual, in a style called camping out.
Which is a metaphor for how you can approach questions or problems and camp out beside them and let the answers come to you a bit more. And I think many people found that really interesting. It takes a little bit more time to explore and camp out beside an issue, but can lead to some very innovative and integrated solutions that people from within the group bring forward.
Maggie says the way we have these conversations by encouraging diversity and equality, as well as building trust, makes big differences in building resilient communities.
Community resilience is related to things like how well we're connected to other people, to resources, to networks, to ability to extend our knowledge or grow our knowledge and to understand how things are working together, our ability to learn and reflect about things. They're really important ingredients.
The Tasman District Council, who were key supporters of the project, agree.
If you actually really wanted to get down to the community level and actually get that wide or broad input to an issue, then it's a great way of actually getting people to give you a real cross-section and a real snapshot of what's been thought. Whereas if you'd gone to like a public meeting or whatever, you'd have a few strong people or a few very motivated people telling you what they thought. But if you actually wanted to get down to a level where you wanted to take an issue and actually wanted to progress that issue and find out ways to resolve it that were going to be enduring, because the issue is, of course, you can come up with a regulation, you can come up with some kind of direction, but it might not have the benefits you want because people haven't enrolled in it, they haven't actually taken on board what the issue was. So if you're going to work with the community to resolve a particular issue, then it has real benefits.
You know, one of the things we've found is people do care about their landscape, their environment. They do, but they may be just not connected up in talking about these things. And so how do we harness an ethic of care and build more effective ways of going about things together? That's really what Watershed Talk was looking at.
Insights from Watershed Talk were also published in a book called Watershed Talk, The Cultivation of Ideas and Actions. And more importantly, the ideas behind the project appear to be working as intended on the ground.
And I know some of the staff have already used some of those approaches when they've taken on particular issues, and that they have tried to, talk to people beforehand. They have tried to get an understanding of how people viewed the situation, and then when they're in a room, rather than having that kind of question and answer session, they've actually tried to get the people more involved, so a bit more led by the audience rather than directed from the front.
I think if we can build forums like that, or ways to express ourselves that lead to more reverence toward the environment and also a bit of humility toward it, it's not a bad place to be.